Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English Podcast. My name is Gideon, and this is a podcast for all learners of English to practice and improve in a relaxed and natural way. I hope you are doing well. I hope you've had a good week, wherever you are in the world and whatever you have been doing. Now, in this episode, we are going to talk about motivation. Okay. Now you might be thinking, motivation. We've spoken about that before. We've looked at that before, which is true. We have spoken about motivation a few times throughout the history of this podcast. We've looked into how you can stay motivated. Where does motivation come from? But today, we're going to look at it from a bit of a different perspective. Okay. We're going to read an excerpt from the very famous book, very popular book, quite recently called Atomic Habits. Now, you might be familiar with this book. You might have read it. I have actually not read it myself, but I think it was the New York Times best-selling book. So it's popular. But we're going to read a portion of it that is entitled The Goldilocks Rule: How to Stay Motivated in Life and Business. Okay. The Goldilocks Rule: How to Stay Motivated in Life and Business. And it gives just a bit of a different idea of how we can approach motivation. And I absolutely loved it. I genuinely thought the idea that this promoted was fantastic, and it is something that I'm going to incorporate, hopefully, into my life. So we're going to get into that in a moment. Perhaps you've read the book. If you have read the book, please let me know in the comments now. What were your thoughts on it? Did you find it helpful? Was it your cup of tea or not? Let me know. If you have read Atomic Habits, I would love to know. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And of course, as we go through, we'll have a good old chit chat about what we're reading. We're going to look definitely at some new vocabulary. And then at the end, we're going to just see how we can apply what we have learnt, what we have discussed to the English language. So there you go. That's what we're going to talk about today. But just a little bit of a catch up before we get into it. I hope you're doing well. I hope your week has treated you well. I hope you accomplished everything that you needed to. Still in England, in the southeast of England here, we are having some remarkable weather. We had the first bit of rain on Tuesday, which was the first bit of rain we've had in a while. And as you know, I'm very much into my gardening at the moment. So I was very pleased for the lawn. So that was one thing that made me really happy. The lawn was well watered and starting to look quite luscious and green, which was an update you didn't ask for. But yeah, there you go. So if you are new here, please don't forget to subscribe. As I said in the intro, I create podcasts like this that you can watch on you can't watch it on Spotify. You can watch on YouTube and you can listen to on Spotify. And the purpose of this podcast is just to help you absorb and take in the English language in a real and authentic way. So I never fully script these episodes. Of course, we do a bit of reading. I have notes, but it's not fully scripted. And the idea of that is so you can hear the English language in its most natural form, and that will better prepare you for real life situations. So when you're out and about, when you come over and visit us here in London, you'll be prepared as much as possible with the English language. So that's what we're doing. So yeah. Nothing else to catch up on, so we might as well get into it. So, the Goldilocks Rule: How to Stay Motivated in Life and Business. And I thought that title was quite interesting in and of itself. Motivation in life and business, to me, are very separate things. And the reason I say that is because, okay, motivation for me, for my business, for work, is so that I can enjoy life. So in a way, I guess they are connected there. But my motivation for life is by no means business, if that makes any sense. So there is a separation there. That the motivation that I have for life, I would say personally, is very different to the motivation that I have for business. And this really, what it does is it presents a principle. It presents an idea that we can apply to staying motivated in all areas of life and in all areas of business. And what we're going to do first is read about the story of a very famous American, was a comedian turned actor. So I'm not going to tell you who it was until the article lets us know. But if you have any inclinations or any ideas as we go through who you think this actor might be, let me know in the comments. No cheating. So put the timestamp at which you had your guess. So then we'll know if you cheated and you wrote it down after it had been revealed to you. So as we're going through this, if you've got any guesses as to who we are initially talking about, which comedian/actor it is, let us know in the comments, but include the timestamp. That will validify your guess. Okay. So as always, what we're going to do is just relax. We'll read this article together so you know what I'm going to say. If you do want to grab a cup of tea, grab a cup of coffee, it's Sunday morning, have some breakfast whilst you're watching and listening along with me, I highly recommend that. Just chill, just relax. Life can be hectic. So, just enjoy the English language with me. And if you want to read along, if you want to speak along with me as I read, please go ahead. So here we go. There we go. The Goldilocks Rule. How to stay motivated in life and business. In 1955, Disneyland had just opened in Anaheim, California, where a 10-year-old boy walked in and asked for a job. Labour laws were loose back then, and the boy managed to land a position selling guidebooks for 50 cents a piece. Okay, so we're going all the way back to 1955 here, when Disneyland had just opened in Anaheim, California. I'm a massive Disney fan. I'm actually more fascinated with the history of Disney and Walt Disney himself. Just the whole concept of Disney, Disneyland and Disney World from a nostalgic point of view, but also just from a business point of view, fascinates me. So we're going back to the original park, the first ever Disneyland that opened, that was in Los Angeles, in Anaheim, California. I was actually really fortunate to just have a couple of days there whilst on my honeymoon, which really loved it. So a 10-year-old boy walked into Disneyland and basically said, Disneyland, I want a job. Can I have a job? So it goes on to say that labour laws were loose back then, and basically saying that, they weren't as strict, they weren't as rigid, they weren't as tight as they are now, even to the point it was so loose that the working law stated that apparently a 10-year-old could go into Disneyland and ask for a job. And they said yes, he managed to land a position. By landing a position, basically saying he managed to get a job. He managed to land a job. So he sold guidebooks, books that were designed to help you, guide you around the park for 50 cents a piece, for 50 cents each. So there you go. That's the situation. Within a year, he had transitioned to Disney's magic shop, where he learned tricks from the older employees. He experimented with jokes and tried out simple routines on visitors. Soon, he discovered that what he loved was not performing magic, but performing in general. He set his sights on becoming a comedian. So within the time frame of a year, this young man had transitioned or moved, I guess, in this case, it was almost like a promotion to Disney's magic shop. So he's gone from selling guidebooks to Disney's magic shop, where he learned magic tricks from older employees, from older ones that had been working there. And he experimented with jokes and, just tried out different things to see if they would work. And he would do this on visitors that were there. And as he was doing this, as he was experimenting, as he was developing his craft of entertaining, he discovered that it wasn't magic, it wasn't performing magic that he loved, but just performing in general. That was what he realised his passion was. So then it says that he set his sights on becoming a comedian. Now, if we set our sights on a goal or a kind of a route that we want to take in life, that's what we are focused on. Our sights are set. We don't see anything else. That is our focus. That is where we're heading. That is where we want to go. So he set his sights on becoming a comedian. Beginning in his teenage years, he started performing in little clubs around Los Angeles. The crowds were small, and his act was short. He was rarely on stage for more than 5 minutes. Most of the people in the crowd were too busy drinking or talking with friends to pay attention. One night, he literally delivered his stand-up routine to an empty club. Okay, got any ideas who it could be yet? So he's American, comedian. It's around 1955, so he's getting on a little bit. I'll give you a clue. This comedian, this actor, is still alive today, recently did a TV series on Disney Plus, and is kind of a guy that everybody loves. All right, there's your clue. I actually watched the TV series that he did, and it was absolutely fantastic. So beginning in his teenage years, so now we're getting to the point where, okay, he's had that job, 10 years old at Disney. Now he's a teenager, wants to be a comedian. So he started performing in little clubs around Los Angeles to small crowds. Nothing big, and his act was very short. Rarely on stage for more than 5 minutes. If something is rare, it doesn't happen often. And most of the people that he was delivering his routine to in the crowds, they were busy drinking. So drinking alcoholic beverages, getting intoxicated, getting drunk, and talking with friends around them. So he was kind of like the background noise of the club. Whilst he was delivering his routine, everybody else was kind of just going about their evening. One night, he literally, meaning that it actually happened, it is literal, it is real, delivered his stand-up routine to an empty club. Now, could you imagine doing that? For me, the idea of performing in front of a crowd, it's not really my cup of tea. Let alone performing in front of a crowd on your own with the goal of making them laugh. And they don't know you, so you haven't got your reputation to fall back on. Like, for example, when you go and see a comedian that's built up a reputation, is well loved, even if he's not hilarious, people are still enjoying the time because they're seeing their favourite comedian. But if you're a comedian that nobody else knows, they don't know who you are, you've built up no reputation to back you up, you're kind of on your own. That is a tough thing to do. So he even got to the point where he was doing it to an empty club. It wasn't glamorous work, but there was no doubt he was getting better. So no question, no doubt. His first routines would only last 1 or 2 minutes. By high school, his material had expanded to include a 5-minute act and, a few years later, a 10-minute show. At 19, he was performing weekly for 20 minutes at a time. He had to read 3 poems during the show just to make the routine long enough. But his skills continued to progress. So he starts off saying here, this was not glamorous work, it's not the high life. It's something is glamorous. It's nice to look at. You enjoy it. It's not the most glamorous of jobs. But there's no doubt, there's no question that he was getting better. He was improving. So his first routines only lasted 1 or 2 minutes, but by high school, here in England we say secondary school, his material had improved. He worked his way up to a 5-minute act, then a 10-minute show. And towards his late teens, at 19, he is performing for at least 20 minutes a time. But his skills just continued to progress. He just continued developing that craft of being a comedian. He spent another decade experimenting, adjusting, and practicing. He took a job as a television writer, and gradually he was able to land his own appearances on talk shows. By the mid-1970s, he had worked his way into being a regular guest on The Tonight Show and Saturday Night Live. So he spent another decade, another 10 years experimenting, adjusting, adapting and practicing. So this isn't something that really happened overnight. This was a lot of work. He took a job as a television writer, and then he started to have appearances on talk shows. Talk shows are where you have a presenter, they talk about different topics, they interview guests, with the idea of focusing on entertainment. And by the mid-1970s, so halfway through the 1970s, he worked his way up the ladder to being regular guest on two very famous chat shows or talk shows in America. You've got The Tonight Show and Saturday Night Live. If you've got any guesses at this point, should be around the 15 to 17 minute mark, let us know in the comments. So put your guess and then the time. I've realised you can easily cheat this. So just have a guess. Get involved. Have fun. Okay. Finally, after nearly 15 years of work, the young man rose to fame. He toured 60 cities in 63 days, then 72 cities in 80 days, then 85 cities in 90 days. He had 18,695 people attend one show in Ohio. Another 45,000 tickets were sold for his 3-day show in New York. He catapulted to the top of his genre and became one of the most successful comedians of his time. So it took time. After years of work, the young man rose to fame. If something rises up, he rose to fame. And then he started touring cities, and his tours just got bigger and bigger. It didn't stop. Even for one show he had in Ohio, nearly 19,000 people attended. So you've gone from dive bars where everyone's drinking and talking, even at sometimes being a completely empty bar, to now nearly 19,000 people attending one show, selling 45,000 tickets to a 3-day show in New York. He catapulted to the top of his genre. If he catapulted, it's like the device, a catapult, which would fling something, particularly in battle. It was a weapon, that would fling a large, ball of something or whatever across to its opponent, but it would happen very quickly. Or he catapulted to the top, meaning once he rose to fame, his journey to the top, to success, was very quick. It was very sudden. And he became top of his genre and became one of the most successful comedians of his time. Do you have any guesses who it is? I'm going to let you know now. It was Steve Martin. Okay, his name is Steve Martin. And I enjoyed reading that little bit about him because I didn't know that. It's funny, isn't it? We think of Steve Martin as being this massively successful actor and just always being that way. But when we think about his journey, it's just incredible. So just a little recap on who Steve Martin is. I've put a little screenshot here if you're watching on YouTube, just with some of his probably more famous movies. Let's have a look. Where is it? Here you've got The Three Amigos. Great film. Family favourite of mine. Planes, Trains and Automobiles. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Father of the Bride. Cheaper by the Dozen. Oh, there's just loads. He's done loads of that. Just good fun comedy films. Have you got a favourite Steve Martin film? Let me know in the comments. And he recently did that series, with Selena Gomez and Martin Short. Only Murders in the Building. Brilliant series. So look at this. I mean, from going from 1955 to just walking into Disneyland asking for a job to this point of being one of the biggest comedic actors of all time. We often think, oh, you're so lucky. Well, I'd love to be Steve Martin. Or no, I've never thought I'd love to be Steve Martin. But what I mean is the idea behind it. When we see people's success or where they've kind of got to, we just kind of freeze them in that point of success, don't we? But we don't realize all the work, the grueling effort that went into it. So yeah, just some idea of who Steve Martin is. And there's a picture of him there performing in Chicago, Illinois in 1978. So the question is, how did he stay motivated? That is a big question to ask here. How on earth was Steve Martin able to stay motivated through really nearly decades of hard work, grafting, performing, and to empty crowds, just knowing that you've got to keep hustling, you've got to keep going, you've got to keep working. How did he stay motivated? Well, that's what we're going to look at now. I recently finished Steve Martin's wonderful autobiography, Born Standing Up. I've added that to my list to read. Actually, I'm probably going to listen to it as an audiobook. I'm looking forward to that one. Martin's story offers a fascinating perspective on what it takes to stick with habits for the long run. Comedy is not for the timid. It is hard to imagine a situation that would strike fear into the hearts of more people than performing alone on stage and failing to get a single laugh. And yet, Steve Martin faced this fear every week for 18 years. In his words, 10 years spent learning, 4 years spent refining, and 4 years as a wild success. So it says here, Steve's story offers a fascinating perspective or an interesting view on what it takes to stick with habits for the long run, for the duration, for a long amount of time. Makes a good statement here. Comedy is not for the timid. A timid person is shy, is reserved, holds back. Comedy is not for them. Completely agree with that. And it's hard to imagine a situation that would strike fear, put fear into the hearts of more people than the idea of having to perform on a stage with the purpose of making people laugh and not getting a single laugh. I can't imagine what that must feel like. I don't think I have. I don't know. I'd like to think I'd be able to get through it, but I don't think I could. I don't know if I'm made of the right stuff to do that. But Steve Martin was. He faced this fear every week for 18 years. How on earth do you stay motivated to do that for 18 years? So in his words, he spent 10 years learning, 4 years spent refining. If we refine something, we make it better. We almost like sculpt it to be more beautiful, to be more appealing. And that's what he did with his crafts. And then 4 years as a wild success. What is it that some people like Martin, why is it that some people like Martin stick with their habits? Whether practicing jokes or drawing cartoons or playing guitar, while most of us struggle to stay motivated. How do we design habits that pull us in rather than ones that fade away? Scientists have been studying this question for many years. While there is still much to learn, one of the most consistent findings is that the way to maintain motivation and achieve peak levels of desire is to work on tasks of just manageable difficulty. Now that's the point that we're really going to talk about now. Just manageable difficulty. So we'll come on to that in a moment. But what is it that keeps them motivated? While most of us struggle or find it difficult to stay motivated, how do you design habits, design routines that pull us in to what we're doing rather than ones that slowly fade away? Have you done that? Have you created habits? Have you created routines that just over a certain period of time, they just fade away? They just come in, they just end up being last year's little routine. I've done it loads of times. But what is it that makes these ones stay motivated? Well, scientists realise there's much to learn about it, but to maintain motivation and achieve or to gain peak levels, the highest level of desire is to work on tasks of just manageable difficulty. Now, if something is manageable, we can do it. It's manageable. It's not too difficult for us. We know that we can accomplish it. But here, it's presenting the idea of just manageable difficulty. So it is just about doable. It is just about achievable. And that to me is the really interesting point of this Goldilocks rule. So let's look into it now. The Goldilocks rule. The human brain loves a challenge, but only if it is within an optimal zone of difficulty. If you love tennis and try to play a serious match against a 4-year-old, you will quickly become bored. It's too easy. You'll win every point. In contrast, if you play a professional tennis player like Roger Federer or Serena Williams, you will quickly lose motivation because the match is too difficult. So, puts an interesting point across here, talking about the optimal. If something is optimal, it is perfect. It is just right. Zone of difficulty. So, the human brain, generally speaking, loves a challenge. So it presents a scenario here that if you love tennis and you want to have a match, if you play against a 4-year-old, you're not in that optimal zone of difficulty, are you? Because you're going to win. You're going to become bored. It's too easy. But in contrast, so on the other hand, if you play a professional tennis player, you're still not within that optimal zone of difficulty because the match is going to be too difficult. You're going to lose motivation. So where's the balance? You don't want it to be too easy. Otherwise, you're just not interested. You don't want it to be too difficult because it's not achievable. You're defeated. We need to find that optimal zone of difficulty or that just manageable difficulty. Now consider playing tennis against someone who is your equal. As the game progresses, you win a few points and you lose a few. You have a good chance of winning, but only if you really try. Your focus narrows, distractions fade away, and you find yourself fully invested in the task at hand. This is a challenge of just manageable difficulty, and it is a prime example of the Goldilocks rule. Fascinating, isn't it? So now let's imagine that we play a tennis match against our equal, so someone who is at the same level as ours. We are equal in our tennis playing skills. So as you play the game, you're going to win some points and you're going to lose some points. But the reality is, you do have a good chance of winning, but only if you try, only if you put in effort, only if you really give it your all, is that chance of winning probable. So because we are trying hard, because we know that we have a chance of winning, if we put in the correct effort, our focus narrows, meaning that we're not focused on anything else. It's like that tunnel vision. Our distractions fade away, and you find yourself fully invested, fully committed to the task at hand, to the job that is in front of you, winning that match. And that is an example of just manageable difficulty. And it is a perfect example of the Goldilocks rule. What is that Goldilocks rule? Well, the Goldilocks rule states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of their current abilities. Not too hard, not too easy, just right. Now, if you're familiar with the story of Goldilocks, do a little recap in a moment, but that will sound a bit familiar. So that is the essence of this Goldilocks rule, that we experience peak motivation, that desire to keep going, to not stop, to keep working hard when we work on tasks that are on the edge of our current ability. So they are achievable, we can do them, as long as we work hard, as long as we try. So they're not too hard, they're not too easy, they're just right. Martin's career is an excellent example of the Goldilocks rule in practice. Each year, he expanded his comedy routine by only by a minute or two. He was always adding new material, but he also kept a few jokes that were guaranteed to get laughs. There were just enough victories to keep him motivated and just enough mistakes to keep him working hard. So Martin's comedy career, Steve Martin, it was an excellent example of this Goldilocks rule in practice. So each year he kept on expanding, kept trying to improve, kept trying to add to his routine. But, he kept some of those jokes that were guaranteed to get laughs. It wasn't a question. He knew that they worked. He knew that they were going to get laughs. So where that Goldilocks rule comes in is that he had enough victories to keep him motivated, to keep him going, but also enough mistakes to keep him working hard. That it was just right. What he was achieving, what he was working towards was within that just manageable difficulty. And we've got a great illustration here from the website, jamesclear.com. We got kind of on the left, I'll try and explain it to you if you're listening on Spotify. I'm going to give this a go. On the left, there's a large mountain with basically a stick man, just head down. Can't do it. The mountain's too large. On the right-hand side, you have a small hill. And the stick man's looking at it thinking, is that it? I can do this easy. I can do this easily, sorry. Not a problem at all. So you've got a guy on the left, defeated. Guy on the right, not challenged at all. But then you got the perfect hill in the middle, which the stick man's at the top of it. He was able to climb. Yeah, took some effort, took some working, but it was just manageable enough for him. It was just manageable enough, just challenging enough that it kept him going, but wasn't too easy at all. And that is the Goldilocks rule. We have to find that optimal zone of motivation. And why do we call it the Goldilocks rule? So just as I put as a little note here, in the story, Goldilocks tastes 3 bowls of porridge and finds that one is too hot, one is too cold, but the third is just right. Neither extreme. This just right concept, applicable across various disciplines, is what the rule is named after. So we could say, rather than too hot, too difficult. It's not too cold, too easy, but it's just right. It's in that optimal zone of challenging. So that's what that Goldilocks rule is. So how can we apply it? Measure your progress. If you want to learn how to stay motivated to reach your goals, then there is a second piece of the motivation puzzle that is crucial to understand. It has to do with achieving that perfect blend of hard work and happiness. So, talking about this piece of motivation puzzle, there's a crucial piece that we have to understand. If something is crucial, it is essential. And that is finding the perfect blend or the perfect mix of hard work and happiness. Working on challenges of an optimal level of difficulty has been found to not only be motivating, but also to be a major source of happiness. As psychologist Gilbert Brim put it, one of the important sources of human happiness is working on tasks at a suitable level of difficulty, neither too hard nor too easy. So it brings now into this aspect of when we work on challenges of optimum level of difficulty, not only motivating, but they're also a huge source of happiness. And I guess this is because we're able to achieve them. We're able to accomplish something, but only because of hard work. If we think about it, something that brings us happiness is often something that took a lot of work. It didn't just come to us easily. It wasn't just a walk in the park. So this scientist, the psychologist here, goes on to say that one of the most important sources of happiness for humans is working on tasks at this suitable level of difficulty. This blend of happiness and peak performance is sometimes referred to as flow, which is what athletes and performers experience when they are in the zone. Flow is the mental state you experience when you are so focused on the task at hand that the rest of the world fades away. Have you ever experienced that, where you're doing something, you are so focused on it that you forget about time, you forget about everything else, and you just focus on that task? And that is what, as it says in this paragraph, athletes and performers, they get into that zone of flow so they don't get distracted, so they work at their optimal level. And that is what that blend of happiness and peak performance is referred to. Or how do we reach that state? In order to reach this state of peak performance, however, you not only need to work on challenges at the right degree of difficulty, but also measure your immediate progress. As psychologist Jonathan Haidt explains, one of the keys to reaching a flow state is that you get immediate feedback about how you are doing at each step. I was talking about this with a student this week. We actually went through this article together in a private class, and we was talking about this idea of getting, immediate feedback. And I guess it does depend what we are doing, but that immediate tracking of progress is how we can kind of reach that state of peak performance, perfect level of performance. So not only do we need to work on challenges that are at that right degree of difficulty, but we also want to try and measure our immediate progress. So we want to try and get immediate feedback, immediate results, immediate information about how we are doing at each step. Seeing yourself make progress in the moments is incredibly motivating. Steve Martin would tell a joke and immediately know if it worked based on the laughter of the crowd. Imagine how addicting it would be to create a roar of laughter. The rush of positive feedback Martin experienced from one great joke would probably be enough to overpower his fears and inspire him to work for weeks. So, and again, coming back to the example of Steve Martin here, that once he told a joke, he would get that immediate feedback from the laughter of the crowd. But could you imagine how addicting it would be to create that roar of laughter? That rush, that immediate flow of positive feedback that he would get from one great joke. And that positive feedback, that immediate feedback would help him overcome his fears. And that in turn would be his motivation. That just working within that optimal zone, that just manageable difficulty, getting that immediate feedback would be his motivation, his inspiration for him to keep going for weeks. In other areas of life, measurement looks different, but is just as critical for achieving a blend of motivation and happiness. In tennis, you get immediate feedback based on whether or not you win the point, regardless of how it is measured. The human brain needs some way to visualize our progress. If we are to maintain motivation, we need to be able to see our wins. But I think sometimes we don't see our wins because we blind ourselves to them. Isn't that true? We are our own worst enemy. I think particularly when it comes to the English language, we're not always happy to accept the immediate feedback, whether we win or whether we lose. But that's something that we perhaps need to work on, even in life, in business, and with the English language. Visualize our progress. Look at that immediate feedback. How are we doing? So the 2 steps to motivation, if we want to break down the mystery of how to stay motivated for the long term, we could simply say, 1, stick to the Goldilocks rule and work on tasks of just manageable difficulty. Maybe that's something we can look at in life. I know I'm going to apply this perhaps more to exercise. I've got myself stuck in a rut of making my workouts probably too easy. I need to get up to that point of just manageable difficulty. And I tried it actually for a couple of days and I feel more motivated. Okay, it's not as easy, but I'm achieving something and I feel a lot more inspired to keep going. I'm going to try and apply it to the podcast. Sometimes I can fall into the realms of just doing episodes about things that I find easy to talk about. But let's challenge it a little bit. Let's go to an area where it's not as comfortable, but I know I can do it with a bit of hard work. What's the area in your life that you think, you know what, this is either too hard or too easy for me? I need to get to that point of just manageable difficulty. Is it life, work, cooking, gardening, your hobbies, family, money? I don't know. Whatever it is, the English language. Can we apply that Goldilocks rule? Secondly, we want to measure our progress and receive immediate feedback whenever possible. I think immediate feedback is something we don't get a lot in life in many different areas, but if we can get it, we can apply it immediately. We can put it into practice immediately. Wanting to improve your life is easy. Sticking with it is a different story. If you want to stay motivated for good, then start with a challenge that is just manageable. Measure your progress and repeat the process. I love that point. Maybe it's something that we can think about. I know there's certain areas of my life I'm going to try and step up to that point of just manageable difficulty, but also making an effort to track progress and then repeat. And that definitely applies to the English language, because sometimes we put ourselves in a position which is unattainable. We set ourselves a goal or a challenge which is just never going to happen. We're being completely unrealistic. On the other hand, maybe we've just got comfortable with the English language. Maybe we're in a zone where it's not challenging at all. Our English is not perfect, but it's good enough. Well, let's play around with what we're doing a little bit by applying that Goldilocks rule. Let's put ourselves into situations which are in that optimal zone of difficulty. Yeah, they're going to be challenging, but with hard work, we can achieve them. Maybe it's a thesis we're working on. Maybe it's a goal in business, whatever it is. Perhaps at the moment, everything's just a little bit comfortable, or it's too challenging. Maybe we need to lower it a little bit or up that zone of difficulty to a point where we know we can achieve it with hard work, with effort. And that really is true of anything that's worth having. It takes hard work. It takes effort. It's not going to happen overnight. And even with the English language, I get so many comments from you awesome, lovely people saying, I nearly understand every word, but I struggle talking. Put yourself in situations where you can apply that Goldilocks rule, where you can achieve a conversation, but it takes hard work. Put yourself in situations where you can apply it and just see how it works for you. So if you do want to improve, maybe that's something to think about. Are you working within your level of just manageable difficulty, or does it need a bit of adjusting? And apply immediate feedback. Don't ignore immediate feedback in situations. But there you go. So thank you so much for listening along. I thought that was a really good excerpt. I hope you did enjoy it as much as me. I had no idea with that history of Steve Martin. I just thought he was a successful actor and comedian. No. It took a lot of hard work. Took a lot of effort. And took a lot of motivation. So yeah, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Send me an email. Yeah, just get involved, say hi, and please don't forget to like this episode. It really honestly does help me out. Subscribe and share with everybody you know. And I'll see you all next Sunday. Have a good one, guys.